Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to Speaking and Presenting in English with Professor Barry. Last week, we talked about your house or apartment and different rooms in your house and furniture you can find in your house. We also did some prepositions like in and on and in front of. I enjoyed listening to your presentations about your favorite room in your apartment or house. Today we are moving on. This is week 7 now, and we are doing Unit 9. If you'll remember, I told you we will skip around a little bit in the book later in the semester, so please keep in mind that we are now doing Unit 9. And as you can see from the picture here and the title, Unit 9 is about jobs, careers, what you want to do for work in the future. And we can see the woman in this picture is a model. So our title for Unit 9 is, I think I'll be a model when I grow up. When I grow up. This is a common way to talk about what you want to do in the future for children, especially. In America, we always ask kids, what do you want to be when you grow up? And kids will say, oh, when I grow up, I want to be a firefighter or a police officer or a soccer player, for example. So today we're going to be learning about jobs and how to talk about what we want to do in the future. So let's move on and get some vocabulary that we can use for this lesson. And we have here a list of occupations or jobs. Occupation is a fancy word for job. If you'll look at the chart on the right, we'll start there. And we've got quite a few. There is a handy, very useful translation of each of these jobs into Korean right next to the English word. So we have some jobs like architect and taxi driver and nurse, pilot, soccer player, entrepreneur, busboy, janitor, electrician, firefighter, real estate agent, salesperson, lots of different jobs. Down below, you'll see we have at work. So these are vocabulary words that are related to work and the workplace. So we've got some verbs like apply, right? You apply for a job. We have words like resume. That's the piece of paper when you apply for a job, you give a piece of paper that explains your education background and your work experience. That's a resume or a CV. Let's see what else we have here. We have business card. This is a good one. In Korean, you call it a name card. That is Konglish. So please remember that is called a business card in English. Another verb here, collaborate, which just means to work together. If you work in a team, you collaborate with your co-workers, which is the next word, co-worker, the people you work with. Of course, you have a boss. And down below at the very bottom of that column, you'll find the word fire, another verb. So if you don't do a good job at work, your boss might fire you. He might fire you, and then you will not have a job anymore. Your job might be full-time, or it might be part-time, alba, alba in Korean. There's also leave, which is similar to vacation or annual leave, vacation time. You might call in sick. If you are sick, you would call to work and say, I'm sorry, I'm sick today, I can't come. You, of course, work and you get a paycheck. You get money every month for doing your job. Promote, here's another verb. Your boss might promote you if you do a really good job. And if you get promoted, you probably will get a raise. So you will get paid more money because you were promoted. And there are a few more words here at the end. Pension, the money you get when you retire, and benefits, some of the extra nice benefits that your job gives you besides your salary. And also, of course, health insurance. 보험, right? So if you look over on the left, we have some good sentence patterns that will help us talk about work. And you'll find these in the conversations that we're going to discuss. So you've got this number one you should know already because we studied it in the first unit. Where are you from? I'm from New York, or I'm from Seoul, but I live in Gimcheon now. In my case, I can say I'm from Chicago, but I live in Daegu now. What do you do for a job, for a living, as an occupation? Often we will just simply say, what do you do? So if someone asks you, what do you do? They're not asking you, what are you doing now? They're asking, what's your job? What do you do for work? What do you do for a living? In my case, I could say, I'm a professor. In number 3, you have some other examples. I'm a lawyer. I'm a teacher. I'm a nurse. How about you? Important thing to remember here is that article a. You need that article when you answer this question. I'm a Momo, or I'm an. I'm a lawyer. I'm a teacher. I'm an accountant. I'm an engineer. I work in, this is to describe where you work. I work in an office building. I work in a hospital. I work in a university. And then if you have an idea about the person's job, you can ask this yes or no question, number 5. Are you a? So for example, oh, are you a businessman? Are you a doctor? Are you a teacher? So those are some useful sentence patterns, and we already, of course, also discussed the vocabulary words that you can use in this unit. So let's see how we can put some of these vocabulary words and sentence patterns to use in the next slide. Okay, I'm going to read the conversation practice here, and then we're going to answer some questions and talk about it a little bit. So, where do you live? Well, I'm from Seoul, but I live in a town called Gimcheon. Interesting. And what do you do? I'm a student. What about you? I am an international male supermodel. By the way, my sister lives in Gimcheon. What does she do? She's an English teacher at Gimcheon University. Gimcheon University? No way. That's where I go to school. Really? It's a small world. All right, so that was a short conversation, but there's a lot of interesting stuff in here. You'll notice here to ask about jobs, Ricky said, what do you do? I mentioned that earlier. We often use that, simply what do you do, to ask about a job. And I think that's the only, there's nothing difficult in this one. So why don't we just jump right into the questions and see how we do here. So these are just basic comprehension questions. All of the answers are directly in the conversation. So number 1, we want to know, where is Yoon's hometown? And Yoon is a woman in this conversation. Yoon says, I'm from Seoul, but I live in Gimcheon. So her hometown, She is from Seoul. Yoon is from Seoul. Number 2, what does Yoon do? So this is asking about what? That's right, Yoon's job. And Yoon says, I'm a student. And what about Ricky? Ricky is a model. So Yoon is a student and Ricky is a model. We know both of their jobs, their occupations. Number 3, where does Yoon live? So we know she's from Seoul, and she said what? I live in a town called Gimcheon. So she lives in Gimcheon now. And number 4, what about Ricky's sister? Where does she live and what does she do? She lives in Gimcheon too. And what does she do in Gimcheon? She's an English teacher. She's an English teacher at Gimcheon University. And finally, number 5, there's an idiom here. It's a small world. So at the end, Ricky says, it's a small world. What does that mean, it's a small world? Well, we use this phrase to show that we are surprised when we meet someone that's unexpectedly connected to us. So for example, if I'm in Korea and I meet a student and the student says, oh, I used to live in Chicago and of course, I'm from Chicago. That's a big coincidence. And I wouldn't expect that one of my students lived in Chicago before. So I would say, oh, wow, it's a small world. Okay, so that covers conversation practice and the comprehension questions. Let's move on to the next slide. Okay, now this conversation is a little bit silly, but I think it's kind of fun. So Yoon says, are you really an international supermodel? I find it hard to believe. So I can't believe it. Ricky says, why? Yoon says, because you are short, bald, and... Ricky says, and what? Well, your front tooth is missing. You don't seem to fit the job requirement. Ricky says, I'm a hand model. Here it is. Check out my gorgeous hand. Yoon says, oh my God, your hand is so handsome. And Ricky says, I'm too sexy for my glove, which is a joke about a song, an old song. Most of you have probably never heard it. But if you YouTube too sexy for my shirt, you'll be able to listen to it. And he's saying, I'm too sexy for my glove. All right, let's go ahead and look at our questions here. So number 1, what does Yoon find hard to believe about Ricky? She said, you are a supermodel? I find it hard to believe. So she can't believe that he's a model. And why is that hard for her to believe? Well, she describes him down below. She says he is short, bald, and missing a tooth. So if you are bald, that means you have no hair. I am on my way to being bald. If you want to imagine this guy short, bald, and missing a tooth, he might look something like this. Okay, so if you saw him, you would not think, oh, he looks like a supermodel, right? He definitely does not. But if you look at number 3, what kind of supermodel is he? He is a hand model. So maybe he is in TV commercials for hand lotion or something like that. He is not a runway model. And last, what does Yoon think about Ricky's hand? Well, she says, oh, it's so handsome. So she thinks it looks nice. She's very impressed by his hand. That brings us to the presentation portion of the unit. And as you probably guessed, today's presentation will be about your dream job. What do you want to do after graduation? What kind of work do you want to do? So you'll need to think about the job. What are the duties? What kind of skills do you need? What's the work environment like? How much does it pay? And why do you want to do this work? Excuse me. So you can use this presentation guide here to write down some notes. Again, do not write full sentences. You don't need to do that. Instead, just write some keywords, some notes that will help you put together your final presentation. And in the next slide, I'll give you some examples of that. Here I'm using the job of airline pilot. So I've written airline pilot as my job, and I wrote down a couple of duties. So fly and navigate planes, maybe commercial like Korean Air, or private, for example, for a company, or it could be military. Many skills are required, especially math and physics, and you need to be coordinated, be able to use your hands and your hands well, because there's lots of buttons, lots of levers to push and press. So you need to be coordinated, and of course you need to be a good communicator, and you have to think quickly. The work environment is in a cockpit. You can see a picture here of a pilot in his plane's cockpit. And schedules change a lot, and they spend a lot of time in airports, of course. Pay? Well, a commercial pilot makes pretty good money, between 1억 and 2억 per year, and sometimes more. And why? Why this job? Well, I love traveling and I love flying. I've always wanted to be a pilot. Some useful expressions here. Down below, I'm going to tell you about my dream job. I hope to become a momo. As for me, I want to momo. For example, being a pilot is a wonderful job, or is an exciting job, or something like that. Pilots spend most of their time doing, and then you would say what they do with their time, or where they are. And pilots earn a great salary. That's why I want to be a pilot. So, a couple of things to note here. When we talk in general about people doing this work, we use the plural. So pilots spend most of their time, or pilots earn a great salary. Okay, so when you're talking about the job in general, be sure to use plural. And then when you're saying something about you specifically, I want to be a pilot, then you go to the singular, or that's why I want to be a pilot. So be careful of that when you write your script for your presentation. And I will go ahead and give you a sample presentation. You should also do a PPT so that I can see pictures of the job that you want to do. And here is an example. Hi everyone. Today I'm going to tell you about my dream job. After I finish school, I hope to become a pilot. Pilots fly and navigate airplanes. They might work for airlines, private companies, or the military. As for me, I want to fly big commercial planes for a commercial airline like Korean Air or Singapore Airlines. Being a pilot is a tough job. Pilots have to be good at math and physics. In addition, they need good mechanical and technical understanding. They also need to be good communicators, since they have to keep in touch with air traffic controllers during flight. Pilots also need to be able to think quickly in difficult situations. While pilots spend most of their time in airplane cockpits, they also spend a lot of time in airports and in hotel rooms. When it comes to salary, pilots earn a great paycheck, averaging $150,000 per year. Ever since my first flight, I've wanted to become a pilot. For a pilot, every flight is a new experience. I can't imagine sitting at a desk my whole career. I need change and excitement on a regular basis. That's why I want to be a pilot.